Joe Biden has unveiled his game plan to fight the climate emergency we're experiencing, which is in fact a climate emergency. In fact, Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, has just declared a state of emergency as a result of the ongoing drought. 2 counties in California are hit particularly hard by that. But getting back to Biden, Biden's target calls for cutting US carbon dioxide output by 50% to 52% compared with the 2005 levels. And I think this part is important. A far more aggressive goal than the one former President Barack Obama proposed half a decade ago. Biden has called for putting the US on a path to eliminating net greenhouse gas pollution by mid-century. Now, I emphasize the comparison to Obama's administration because it does appear as though Biden loves being compared to Obama as someone who's willing to do more for the American people. So if that positive reinforcement works, great, let's definitely engage in that. But how possible is it for him to hit these lofty goals when Congress continues to be divided and broken? I think that's an important part of this discussion. Before we get to that though, let's take a quick look at what Biden had to say during his virtual conference with dozens of other world leaders.
These steps will set America on a path of net zero emissions economy by no later than 2050. But the truth is, America represents less than 15% of the world's emissions. No nation can solve this crisis on our own, as I know you all fully understand. All of us, and particularly those of us who represent the world's largest economies, we have to step up.
So this is important, especially considering the damage that was done during the Trump administration. Trump famously pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord. He undid some of the environmental regulations we have in the United States. And he essentially said, no, we're not gonna follow through with any of these carbon cutting plans. And so when you're the top polluting country in the world, that makes everyone else think, well, then we're not gonna do anything. Why are we going to innovate or create new technology or move to renewable energy when the United States, the biggest polluter, is refusing to do anything? Biden is trying to reverse that. So that's an important part of the story as well.
Yeah, before I get to Biden's plans and how ambitious they are, and they really are, they're surprisingly ambitious if you ask me. The details are really important, we'll get to in a second. Just 2 kind of side notes. First, congratulations to China, they've actually passed us. Historically, America is by far the biggest polluting country in the history of the world, but China is now #1 in terms of emissions. And they say they're going to also take action. They didn't add much today to what they've said in the past, but they claim that they're going to basically get off of coal by 2060, which would be a big project for them. 2060 is a long time away. So they've done better proposals than us during the Trump era, but now we're getting out ahead of them, which is a good news, great news. Second side note here, Anna told you Gavin Newsom, governor of California, declared a drought in 2 counties in California, and it's a disaster in California for how bad the droughts are. They were last year, they're gonna be this year, they're gonna be again next year. Climate change is 100% real. It's not coming later, it's here now. But I have to share a tweet with you guys from Joe Sandberg. He's the founder of Aspiration and a wonderful and really strong fighter for progressives, right? And he did this tweet about Gavin Newsom's announcement that kind of caught on fire online. He said, please, just simple, please stop approving fracking permits.
Bingo, exactly.
Okay, yeah. So if you think it's really horrible and you're a Democrat and you're the governor of California and you're standing, as Gavin Newsom explained in that photo op, he should be 40 feet underwater, but there's no water in that area. So that's a devastating turn of events. Methane is one of the worst gases there is. In fact, Biden is part of his proposals about that. And fracking is horrible on release of methane. So Sandberg is definitely right about that. But more about Biden's proposals, and then I'll tell you why I think they're so ambitious.
So there's so many different angles to touch this story on. But since you mentioned China, I do want to go back to that real quick, because the good news with this virtual conference that Biden is leading. Really, it was a conference that was organized and put together by the United States. The great thing is that two countries that we absolutely must collaborate and work with agreed to attend. So that's Russia and China. And really, despite all of the other issues that the United States might have foreign policy-wise with these countries, we need to work with them in order to really defeat or deal with climate change effectively. We can't do it unilaterally. Clearly, we can't do that. So Chinese Premier Xi Jinping pledged for the first time to begin reducing coal consumption, to Cenk's point, by the middle of the decade. And he also said, we will strictly control coal-fired power generation projects. We will strictly limit the increase in coal consumption over the 14th five-year period and phase it down in the 15th five-year period, he said, referring to the next economic planning period that begins in 2026. So again, obviously we would like to see more, but right now, understandably, world leaders are hesitant and skeptical of the United States because really the United States and its policy in responding to climate change depends on who's in office. And so if it's gonna change every 4 or every 8 years, they're not gonna follow through on things knowing that the United States could renege on its promises as well. That's why Donald Trump's actions were so incredibly damaging, both when it came to climate issues and also when it came to foreign policy issues like following through with the Iran nuclear deal.
Yeah, so John Kerry, who was appointed by Biden to lead this climate change effort, sounded so confident that I was kind of stunned by it. He's like, oh, we'll hit these goals easy. Now let me read you just 4 of the goals in order to get to the overall number that Biden's trying to hit by 2030. And again, that's only 9 years from now, right? Oil and gas producers would slash emissions of methane, a potent heat trapping gas, by 60%. 60% reduction. Now, it's a reduction, don't get me wrong, from now to 2030. No, it's from the 2005 numbers when they started this in the first place, this long-term project. But still, reducing by 60% is a big number by 2030. Okay, more surprising numbers. Virtually all of the 200 remaining coal plants in the US would shut down unless they too can capture their emissions and bury them underground, according to the New York Times, okay? Shutting down all 200. Now, Biden hasn't said he's gonna shut down all of those plants, but these are the numbers that would be required to hit the goal. By 2030, half the country's electricity would come from renewable sources such as wind, solar, or hydropower, up from 1/5 today. First of all, did you know that 20% of our energy comes from renewable energies like solar and wind? So that's a big number already. So we're actually making a lot more progress than I think people realize sometimes.
Damn.
But going to half, wow, that is very ambitious by 2030. Great, wonderful, okay? And last one, and there are many others here, but I'm just giving you some of the highlights. By 2030, 2/3 of the new cars and SUVs sold would be battery powered, up from roughly only 2% today. Now that's not all the cars on the road, that's new cars sold by 2030, but going from 2% to 2/3 of all cars. No wonder Tesla stock is through the roof. So if they can hit those numbers and they seem weirdly confident about it, that is a good start. Look, we're super tough on corporate Democrats and we give them no quarter at all. But if you're gonna do wonderful things, we'd love to give you credit.
Yes.
So I like this strong effort here. Obviously, it's super important that they follow through.
It's super important that they follow through, and there's also a massive caveat that's worth discussing. Because while the proposals coming from the Democratic Party are oftentimes pretty good, they have to actually fight on behalf of those policies. And what we're hearing from the Biden administration is that, maybe we can do all this stuff without having to go through Congress. Maybe we can do it without Congress. No, you can't. You can't. In fact, experts have weighed in on this, and I want to give you 2 quotes. One is from the deputy director of Breakthrough Institute, and he says, I think it would be basically impossible to achieve the proposed target with executive authority. And I think he's right, with executive authority alone, both in terms of investment and regulation. I'm sure there are things the administration can do on the margins, but for the ambition they're announcing, I can't see it happening without legislation, unless Look, the executive branch has a lot of power when it comes to issues involving national security. This is a national security issue. So is Biden willing to flex that muscle? That's the big question. But simply saying like, we don't necessarily need Congress without filling in the blanks of how you intend on doing this without Congress, I think is a problem. And then Mark Dyson from RMI also told Politico, the answer to the question of whether the White House can achieve such a goal alone is almost certainly no. It is very unlikely that this goal could be achieved without new federal legislation. Currently, many of the key rules and regulations are done at the state level. While some states have aggressive policies, they are not uniform or aggressive enough to meet the goal. And I think Mark Dyson is right about that as well.
Yeah, so my giant caveat is they're about to introduce an infrastructure bill at some point, and that was supposed to be $2.2 trillion. Credit to people like AOC who said it should be larger, and it should. And partly because, of course, then Biden is going to go to compromise and cut the hell out of it. And so now Chris Coons, probably the top ally of Joe Biden in the Senate, is talking about $800 billion. Why is Biden's top ally instantly taking it down from 2.2 trillion to 800 billion? So that's a giant deduction. One of the things that now Susan Collins is asking for, and I'm really worried about, is that they're going to take out every part of the infrastructure bill that has to do with Green New Deal. Well, then how the hell are you going to hit these goals if you take out the parts about the environment from the infrastructure bill? So why is it related to infrastructure? You need green jobs. If you want to switch from 20% to 50% of our energy coming from solar, wind, et cetera, well, you have to have infrastructure built to support that. How about all the cars? If you're going to have 2/3 of the cars being sold being electric cars, you need charging stations. It's like Eisenhower building the highways. It is, but which, by the way, helped our economy tremendously and created a ton of jobs. That you were on the right track, but if you send Coons and others to go butcher that bill before you even get started, well, then you're not going to hit any of these goals, and it's empty talk. So, look, jury's out. I like the proposals. Let's see if they follow through, and if they don't, we'll be here to tell you. A lot of folks in the rest of the media play patty cakes. We deal in facts, and it doesn't matter which side is on claiming those facts. We're gonna follow through and find out what's actually true and report it back to you guys.